This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The Quarantine Report. I'm Amy Goodman in New York, joined by Democracy Now! Co-host Juan Gonzalez in New Brunswick, New Jersey. Hi, Juan.
Hi, Amy, and welcome to all of our listeners and viewers across the country and around the world.
Well, we begin today's show in Gaza, where Israeli airstrikes have killed at least 26 Palestinians, including 9 children, as tension in the region escalates sharply over the past day. In one attack, 7 members of a single family in Gaza died, including 3 children. Meanwhile, over 700 Palestinians were hurt in Jerusalem and the West Bank by Israeli security forces Monday. Hundreds were injured when Israeli forces stormed the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the third-holiest site in Islam. Hamas responded by firing hundreds of rockets into Israel. No deaths were reported, but police said over 24 people were injured. Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh warned rocket attacks will continue until Israel stops, quote, all scenes of terrorism and aggression in Jerusalem and Al-Aqsa Mosque, unquote. The tension in Jerusalem has been mounting for weeks as Palestinians have been protesting Israel's plans to forcibly evict dozens of Palestinians in the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood of Jerusalem to give their homes to Jewish settlers. A court hearing on the eviction, scheduled for Monday, was postponed. The United Nations has described the planned eviction as a possible war crime. In Gaza, families have started to bury the dead after Monday's airstrikes. Survivors describe the airstrikes killing young children.
What happened here is we were sitting outside the house waiting for iftar, the breaking of the fast. An 8-month-old child was killed. Muhammad, who was getting married in 5 days after Eid, was killed. How is this the children's fault? Girls between the ages of 7 and 9 have been killed. How is this their fault? We are just sitting outside the house waiting for the call to prayer.
Israeli Knesset member Ahmad Tibi blamed Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for the violent escalation, which comes as Netanyahu is fighting for his political life.
There is escalation. Somebody is responsible for this escalation. His name is Benjamin Netanyahu and Amir Ohana, Minister of Interior Security Affairs. They are interested in this escalation by the Israeli police, and we are here as members of the joint list to stand with the Palestinian families in East Jerusalem, in Sheikh Jarrah, and in Al-Aqsa Mosque. East Jerusalem is an occupied city, and the march today is celebrating the occupation.
We're joined now by 2 guests. Orly Noy is in Jerusalem, an Israeli political activist and editor of the Hebrew-language news site Local Call, a member of B'Tselem's executive board. And joining us from Gaza City, Raji Sourani, award-winning human rights lawyer, director of the Palestinian Center for Human Rights in Gaza. He's the 2013 Right Livelihood Award laureate. He's on the executive board of the International Federation for Human Rights, received the Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights Award in 1991. He was also twice named an Amnesty International Prisoner of Conscience. Raji Sourani, let's go to you first in Gaza. What the latest numbers we have, 26 people, Palestinians have been killed, among them a number of children. Can you describe the scene on the ground?
Thank you, Amy. It's very hard. It's very tough. It's bloody. It's a bleak, black situation. In less than 24 hours, I mean, this harvest of lives and injuries and destruction, it's unprecedented. And this reminds us just in what had happened in 2014, 2012, and 2008. But this time, I mean, it seems it's much more tougher than it has been before. Israel, I mean, dominate entirely Gaza, and they are bombing. They didn't stop since yesterday till this moment, and every moment, I mean, this situation deteriorates more, escalates more, and we are having more killings, more injuries, more civilian targets bombed. And in the eye of the storm, unfortunately, as usual, the civilians and the civilian targets. And that's the real worry. As if Gaza just need that. We have the occupation. We have the blockade for the last 14 years. which paralyzed our entire life. We have the pandemic, and now, I mean, we have this fourth war against Gaza and civilian targets in the eye of the storm. Once and again, Israel do flagrantly violate international law, international humanitarian law, which is there to protect civilians at the time of war. They didn't respect that, neither in Gaza, nor in Jerusalem, or in Sheikh Jarrah, or in any Palestinian territories. This is a new brand of apartheid, unprecedented, much, much worse than South Africa used to do.
And Raji Sourani, I wanted to ask you what, from your perspective, prompted this latest round of attacks? Clearly, over the last 4 years during the Trump administration, there was an effort by the United States to sort of further marginalize the Palestinian question and the Palestinian, the Israeli occupation. What, in your perspective, led to this new round of attacks by Israel?
Well, I mean, this is very right-wing government, and Prime Minister Netanyahu competing how he can beat the most right extremist, I mean, in Israel. And that's why he's investing and trying his best to suppress, oppress more and more Palestinians, and to do what he is doing right now. And Trump administration gave him wonderful gift. They gave him blessing for the settlements policy in the West Bank to cement this apartheid regime of Israel in Jerusalem and West Bank. They enhanced the ethnic cleansing in Jerusalem towards Palestinians, and Trump gave his executive order by recognizing Jerusalem as the eternal united capital of Israel, unlike any other American administration before. Of course, I mean, Netanyahu felt with that. He has absolute and free hand towards that, especially, I mean, he is in the peak of the elections where his position is shaking, and he tried to prove more and more that he is real national, and he is the one who believes in Eretz Yisrael, from the river to the sea. Palestinians with no existence, we don't exist for him. That's why he wants to clean, I mean, Jerusalem from Palestinians, and that's why when Gaza stood in solidarity as part of the Palestinian people with Jerusalem, he just jumped to that, and he began this orchestrated campaign of bombing, destruction, and killing once again.
And the evictions that have been proposed in the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood of East Jerusalem, the United Nations has described the planned evictions as a possible war crime. But and now we have the Israeli Supreme Court postponing at least a decision on it. Could you talk about the importance of this particular neighborhood as representative of the continuing seizure of land by the Israeli settlers?
Well, Israel Judaized Jerusalem, East Jerusalem. They ethnically cleansing, I mean, the Palestinians from there. They are taking it over day after day by forcing people to leave, by imposing pressure, by expulsion, by building this apartheid wall. The most important court on earth said it's null and void and should be abolished. Sheikh Jarrah is a good example, I mean, for that. They want to take it over. It's stones, it's sands, it's trees, Palestinian genuine part of Jerusalem. And the people in it, I mean, they were refugees. I mean, they came in 1948 to this after Israel forced them to leave, after the atrocities they made against them. And they came to this part and they settled and they are existing there. They don't want them to exist there. Israel, and I want to remind everybody that entirely Jerusalem and occupied territories, this is not by Palestinians, it's by Palestinians, by UN, and the whole world, including the American administration used to call it as such till Trump administration. Now, with what they are doing, they want to force people to leave using the name of the High Court. What is the High Court in Israel? The High Court in Israel and the courts in Israel regarding Palestinians, they are racist, they are schizophrenic, and they are there to provide full legal cover for organized systematic crimes perpetrated against the Palestinian people. They're just giving, I mean, this legal cover for what Israel. They don't apply international law. They don't apply international humanitarian law. For them, this is with non-existence. What they recognize, one thing only. They recognize the right of the Israeli Jews, those who considered holy blood, holy soils, holy land. Others, I mean, we are with non-existence.
I want to go to that video that has gone viral on social media of the Sheikh Jarrah resident, Muna al-Kurd, confronting an Israeli settler who'd been living in her family's home for 12 years.
Jacob, you know this is not your house.
Yes, but if I go, you don't go back. So what's the problem? What are you yelling at me? I didn't do this. I didn't do this.
But
it's easy to yell at me, but I didn't do this.
You are stealing my house.
And if I don't steal it, someone else is going to steal it.
No one is allowed to steal it, ya ammi.
We spoke to Mona al-Kurd's twin brother, Mohammed al-Kurd, yesterday. They are resisting the forcing out of the Palestinians from Sheikh Jarrah. I wanted to bring Orly Noy into the conversation, the Israeli political activist, editor of the Hebrew-language news site Local Call, member of the B'Tselem Executive Board. You are in Jerusalem. Explain what is happening there and the escalation, the way the U.S. media following the Israeli government media often refers to this is Hamas is shooting rockets into Israel. Give us the context before this happened.
Yeah, well, I will get in a minute to the context of this last round of escalation, but before doing that, we need to look at the broader context of the inherent and institutionalized violence against the Palestinians, which is a constant. There is a constant war at different levels that Israel is embarking upon against the Palestinian residents of Jerusalem. First, we need to remember that the Palestinians in Jerusalem, which make about 40% of the city's population, are not citizens of Israel. And they are, as far as Israel is concerned, a sort of temporary residents of the city. It means that their houses are constantly under the threat of demolition, being taken over by settlers. It means that they are basically subjected to a different set of law. And this is part of the apartheid nature of the Palestinian reality everywhere and in Jerusalem. So this is the broader context. The latest round of escalation actually started with the very arbitrary and outrageous decision by the Jerusalem police to ban the Palestinians from gathering at the end of the fast during Ramadan on the wide steps outside Damascus Gate, which is one of the main gathering centers of Palestinians in East Jerusalem, certainly in the month of Ramadan, which, you know, should be those festive evenings after the breaking of the fast, which always happened in Damascus Gate. And I think that the police knew very well that this will not go on protest, and surely enough, the Palestinians did protest, which only gave the Jerusalem police an excuse to treat them with extreme brutality. And I was there night after night. The amount, I cannot even begin to describe what war zone, an actual war zone, the police created because of because of Palestinians protesting against this arbitrary, senseless, provocative decision. And of course, when you add to that the threat of the evictions in Sheikh Jarrah, which, by the way, are not for the first time. Palestinians have been constantly being evicted from not only Sheikh Jarrah, but also from Silwan and from other sensitive areas in the historic Holy Basin of the Old City, and from the Muslim quarter of the Old City itself. So all of that sort of as was very much expected from the first moment, exploded into the situation that we are witnessing right now.
And Orly Noy, could you talk about the how Netanyahu is hoping to benefit from this instability and his own problems that he is facing in terms of being able to form a new government and the repeated elections in Israel, how this plays into his political interests?
Yes, after Netanyahu exhausted the time that was given to him to try and establish a government and failed to do so, his main goal became to prevent his political rivals from succeeding in forming a new government. Now, the Israeli politics is now in a very strange phase in which extreme right-wingers are controlling both sides of the Israeli map, which is the pro-Netanyahu camp and the anti-Netanyahu camp. Also in the the situation in the anti-Netanyahu camp, which now has the mandate to try and establish and form a government, is such that it needs for extreme right-wingers like Naftali Bennett and Gideon Sa'ar to collaborate in some way with central left parties such as Labour Party, Meretz, and with the silent collaboration or cooperation of the Joint List. The sure way for Netanyahu to prevent that cooperation between both political sides in the anti-Netanyahu camp is to provoke them, the situation, the reality, into a war, which in which case it would be much more difficult because the Bennett people, the right-wing people, Sa'ar, Bennett, etc., they need to be accountable to their basis of voters. They want to escalate the situation. They want stronger attacks on Gaza, more violence against Palestinians, both inside and outside 48 territories, which is something, of course, that would make the cooperation with the central left side of the political map almost impossible to achieve.
And at the same time, the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, is on trial for corruption. As we wrap up, Raji Sourani, we just got word from Haaretz that it looks like 2 Israelis were just killed in Ashkelon. That's where the Hamas rockets are falling. And you have the 26 Palestinians, a number of them children, in Gaza as a result of the Israeli attacks. And finally, the response of the United States. Secretary of State Tony Blinken said Hamas needs to end the rocket attacks immediately and added all sides need to de-escalate. What do you think has to happen now? And specifically, what are you demanding of the U.S. government?
To have an end for this bloody, prolonged military occupation. That's the issue. I mean, we cannot live with that. We cannot allow this to happen. I mean, I cannot understand or digest how international community seeing these war crimes, the crimes against humanity, happening once and again, all international human rights organizations know and realize what's going on. This is a new brand of apartheid. There is need to have an end for this conflict. It's a time, sorry, to have something simple apply in this part of the world. Rule of law, make accountability, all what we need. Peace. No one on earth in need for peace more than the suppressed and the oppressed. We suffered a lot as a Palestinian people, but we still having strong feeling toward justice. We want peace based on international law, international humanitarian law. What we need, simple thing, end of the occupation. What we need, end of this aggression. Israel should be held accountable, and U.S. can deliver. It's enough what the American administration did for Israel, providing them full political immunity against the crimes they are doing once and again against Palestinians. ICC as well will be one of the places where these Israeli war criminals will be held against all the crimes they committed against the Palestinian civilians in the occupied territories, against the ethnic cleansing, against the settlements policy, against the atrocities, I mean, they are making day and night.